Hello, everyone. My name is Olive Corning. I want to welcome you to our fourth and final TUC Talk for this season, Transformative, Upbeat Conversations. It is my pleasure to introduce tonight's speaker, Allegra Swanson. Allegra is the new Executive Director of Music Nova Scotia and also currently serves as a Board Director of Orchestras Canada. Allegra's background is extensive and impressive. She has a degree from McGill in singing opera, has trained and worked as an audio engineer, ran the award-winning record label Center Discs at the Canadian Music Centre, where she was also Director of Communications. Since 2016, Allegra managed events and programs for the Canadian Academy of Recording Arts and Sciences and the Juno Awards. Supporting musicians is what Allegra does best, from helping them get records made and released to fostering emerging artists through the Juno's Alan Slate Masterclass program and initiatives focused on women in music. A commitment to engaging more fully in academic and educational circles in Nova Scotia is a further priority. Allegra joined Music Nova Scotia in the fall 2020, working remotely. In December, she and her family moved from Ontario to Dartmouth. So a very warm welcome, Allegra Swanson.
Hi, thank you so much for the introduction, Olive. I'm honored to be here at Trinity United Church in Glasgow. I have to apologize in advance for being sick. Who gets sick these days? I know, is what we're all thinking. My young daughter is off at daycare, and so she is bringing home germs, but I have a negative COVID test, so please ignore my coughing, and I hope to entertain you with lots of information about the music industry. So again, thank you for having me. I'd like to acknowledge that I'm speaking to you from Mi'kma'ki. Here we acknowledge the Mi'kmaq people as the first people of this land, which is still the territory of the Mi'kmaq people, covered by the treaties of peace and friendship, and we are grateful to work and live here. We are living in a fascinating and terrifying time. The arts are vital to the lifeblood of our economy, yes, but also to our mental health as a society. I strongly believe there is an opportunity to be found within the chaos to reimagine how we create and consume music and how organizations and funding bodies can work together to create new grants, programs, and venues to support emerging, mid-career, and experienced artists, but ultimately to bring the joy of music back into our lives. As Olive mentioned, I'm the Executive Director of Music Nova Scotia. Our organization connects the people and the communities of Nova Scotia to the music the province is known for, while improving the economic and cultural sustainability of our music industry and communities. Our flagship event is Nova Scotia Music Week, which is an annual festival, conference, award show, and international delegate buyers program. We're looking forward to hosting Nova Scotia Music Week in nearby Truro, November 4th to 7th this fall. So this year, things are obviously going to look very different at Nova Scotia Music Week, but creativity, I find, can often come from the most challenging circumstances. And we look forward to bringing incredible music to the community this fall with artist and attendee health as a top priority. But more on that to come. Let me tell you a little bit about who I am. My musical life actually started in a similar place to where we are now. At 5 years old at the Fairlawn Avenue United Church Choir in Toronto, led by lauded choral composer Eleanor Daly. I played violin and bassoon in high school, and I also took singing lessons. With a name like Allegra, I'm sure you can imagine it seemed inevitable that I would go into music. The bassoon story is actually an interesting one. I was taking singing lessons and I went to the corner store to make some photocopies after my lesson. The man behind the counter had seen me coming in for multiple weeks and he said, "You must be musical. You're musical." And I said, "Yes." And he pulled up this enormous black case and put it on the counter and he said, "Take this. It's been here for 2 years." And it was a bassoon. And so it was in the summer and I decided to take it home and, pre-COVID, of course, an instrument that, was somebody else's. And I learned to play it over the summer. And in the fall, I joined the band. So anyway, that was sort of my musical life. And that led me gratefully with my parents' support to following my dream to maybe go into music. So I went to McGill University and did an undergraduate degree in voice performance, and then went on to do a graduate diploma in communication studies at Concordia, where I specialized in audio production. My first professional gig was actually as a music licensing assistant at a company called Third Side Music for Ninja Tune in Montreal. And then I applied for this program at the Banff Center, where I was going on to take a position as one of two women chosen to be in the Chorus Radio Entertainment Work Study program. And then I was actually hired on to be the podcast producer. One of the neat stories I have from there is one of the audio engineers brought through the band Weezer, and they had some parts that they wanted a string ensemble to play, and that would accompany the album. And they asked, does anyone do string arrangements? And I didn't, but I thought, well, who would say no to this opportunity? So I said I did. And I then had to spend the night frantically figuring out, right, in a 1 minute piece. It wasn't a long piece. And so I actually got to conduct it as we recorded it the next day, which was really cool. I will never do composing again. It's too hard for me, but that's one of my more favorite memories of my time at the Banff Center. As Olive was mentioning, I then worked at the Canadian Music Centre. It's a nonprofit organization representing over 1,000 Canadian contemporary classical composers. And I ran the Centre Disc recording label, and in my time at the CMC produced over 50 albums. Then I went on to the Caris and the Juno Awards. I was with the team at the Junos for nearly 4 years, and I worked on the development of a future host city strategy. So when you take the Junos from city to city and you ensure that you're engaging the people in the community to understand the real value of being in their community, not just a big show that sweeps into town and then leaves. The point is to really leave a legacy. We also managed the public-facing events, industry events. One of my favorite events I worked on was the Juno train, where we took a train from Toronto to Ottawa with music industry. There was live music, and we actually had a dining car functioning, which was really, really fun. I also managed the Allen Slate Juno Masterclass, which is an artist development program, and led initiatives related to the creative industries code of conduct and safer spaces for all in live music venues, as well as women in music programming. So when the pandemic hit, I was on maternity leave with a 6-month-old, and I watched closely as 3 days before the Juno Awards in Saskatoon, Trump closed the borders, NBA shut down, and of course, Tom Hanks said he had COVID. It was in the span of a few hours, and the crew in Saskatoon had their stages built for the Junos. Industry and artists were starting to arrive, and the entire show was canceled. And my heart was really broken for my team, and not just concern for my future, but also, of course, the future of the industry as a whole. And a few months later, while I waited to see about my future with the Junos, I saw a job posting for what I felt was my dream job. My husband and I had always wanted to move it to the East Coast, but knew it would be a challenge finding a position for me in the industry that would make the move sort of seem worthwhile. I wanted to know that there would be a future for me in my career that I loved so much. My husband's an Acadia grad, so he adored his time living in Nova Scotia. And my mom's actually from Prince Edward Island. She and my dad met while rehearsing for Anne of Green Gables. If you ever listen to the original cast recording, you'll hear them both on that recording. So I was surprised and honored to be offered the position of executive director at Music Nova Scotia. And despite the pandemic, I felt like I had to say yes, and had the support from my family, which was amazing. We'd actually just put a deck on our new deck on our house in the beach, and hadn't planned on moving. But I think that we were excited at the opportunity. And I think that moving and making big change in the pandemic is actually what a lot of people have done, whether they've intended to or not. So I'd like it for everyone to just take a second and to think about the last live music you heard before the pandemic. And I'm sure we've all done this many times for various things, of the last time we did X, Y, or Z before the pandemic. But naturally, I think of music. And for me, it was a special place called Dora Keogh in Toronto. And it's a tiny Irish pub where musicians gather together for a traditional Irish pickup session every Saturday at 4:30. We were frequent flyers of that concert stage. Calling it a concert stage is really not what it is. It's a tiny little corner of the pub. There's a fire in the corner. There are musicians spilling off the stage. Everyone's sitting at tables too close to each other. And, you have to go up and get your drink and bring it back. Everyone's playing violin reels. There are Ilian pipes. Often Tom Power from CBC is playing the guitar. We went with my daughter and my parents in February. It wasn't my daughter's first time, but I loved watching her take in the music and hearing the beat. And I just thought that it would always be part of what we would do together as a family. And I think for most of us, we all do look back and think about how do we take all that for granted? And, I don't think that's really fair because music's always been a part of our life as humans. So of course we take it for granted. I can remember personally the first time I sang with an orchestra when I'd only been at McGill for 4 months. We were singing Mahler's Symphony No. 2, which is the Resurrection Symphony. And I can still feel the awe of singing the last movement when you're surrounded by 60 other people who are singing in the choir and 60 people in the orchestra, and definitely the uncomfortable shoes I was wearing and how it was too hot. But of course, you don't think about that in the moment. There's just this feeling of the power of music in a group and everyone having that same experience. And really, music can do that. And, we've all had those experiences across the course of our lives, even, when you're a kid and you're singing in the summer and, you're using a freezy as a microphone. I mean, we've all done it. And I think that, trying to look back at those memories has made us realize how vital that was. And when the pandemic hit, music was one of the first to shut down, but we all turned to music. Everyone did, regardless of what your industry was. So, of course, music, arts, and culture are vital tools to inspire people, retain community spirit, and enhance well-being. And, we can think of the people in Italy and Spain who were singing on their balconies, or the growth of an interest in virtual choirs that are happening all around the world. And we have to go to great lengths right now to ensure that we don't lose it and we can quicken the recovery of the live music industry. So here in Nova Scotia, music isn't just part of an artist's practice and livelihood, it's vital to our heritage. Music represents $10 million of the GDP of the province. It's a truly thriving sector. And as I said, the live music industry is the first to shut down, and it will be one of the last to recover at this rate. Live music venues themselves were quite tenuous actually before the pandemic, even moving into spaces where socially distanced concerts are being programmed. What is the atmosphere like for an audience watching the show, in some cases in the world behind a plexiglass screen? And what about for audiences who attend shows for hip hop, for example, who are used to coming right up to the front of the stage and having that engagement live? It's really not the same. It's tough on the audience, and it's also really tough on the artists. If artists are lucky to be booked right now for an event, they're often putting their health at risk attending some of these shows, especially last year when some of these concerts outdoors were new and the policies and procedures for safe COVID events weren't really secured. So I'd like information from the Music Association, which is an organization founded in 2014 that is the voice of Canada's vibrant live music industry. It works to advance and promote its many economic, social, and cultural benefits. Before March 2020, the Canadian live music industry provided 72,000 jobs and contributed approximately $3 billion to the national GDP. So since March 2020, it started pandemic, the industry has reported 92% average revenue loss, 64% of the industry is at risk of permanent closure. 1 in 4 arts, entertainment, and recreation workers lost their jobs in 2020. So that's 114,000 artists, technicians, marketing staff, arts administrators, and other cultural workers who could no longer earn a living out of their profession. 85% of professional musicians agree that if they can't perform live, they will have a difficult time making a living. More than 75 prominent music venues across the country have closed their doors permanently. And over 3 times as many individuals and organizations report very high or high levels of stress and anxiety. And it's not an uncommon story outside of the music industry, as well, as we all know, across culture, but also across other sectors in our economy. When I came to my new job at Music Nova Scotia in September, I was really reassured by the amazing work the Music Nova Scotia team had done in collaboration with the province and the Department of Communities, Culture and Heritage. Grants were provided to artists in a series of COVID relief funding initiatives. Over the course of the pandemic to date, we've actually dispersed nearly $200,000 to artists and music businesses. It began with helping artists recoup costs for canceled tours, flights, accommodations, performance fees, and then moved on to areas like time, supporting the cost of capital expenses. So artists could buy the necessary gear, in some cases soundproof home studios, so that they could continue to work, but safely within of the quarantine and the pandemic. So obviously it's clear that recovery is not going to be easy. Most of the concern for economic recovery is being expressed about accommodations, hospitality, but the performing arts and heritage sector are the second hardest hit in change in GDP due to the pandemic of all across all industries. So for years now, streaming has supplanted record sales and other traditional sources of income. So musicians have been forced to rely more and more on unending tours, which is fine until you cancel being able to tour. Moving forward, we need to be thinking about the entire scope of how a song comes to be if we hear it on the radio. So think about, in this next stage of events, how many people are actually employed in this process. So an instrument has to be created first. Someone creates the instrument. Someone has to play the instrument. And alone, for schools who even have musical instruments, which I recognize now are few and far between, they have to share musical instruments across the classroom. And oftentimes that's a challenge to begin with in terms of numbers of instruments. But right now with COVID, it's next to impossible to do that safely. The instrument creation, the teaching of the music, then finding spaces to practice, a safe space for some people, a quiet space for some people. You need composers. Composers have to write the music. Composers need a way to share their music. So I can write a music piece in my room, but how do I get it out to those people who are playing those instruments? Then an artist needs to actually record the music. So we need to have an artist in a space and a quiet space with access to a studio, an audio engineer, gear, and oftentimes that funding is quite challenging to come by. Then we need to get the music out the door. How do we package it? How do we get it online? How do we get it into the hands of those who are listening? And that's just the practical way of delivering the music. What about the marketing of the music? How do we get people to want to listen to the music once it's online? And then at the end of it, how are artists paid? You think about how many people are involved. So an artist in BC, Steve Sanis, was recently quoted in the Globe and Mail, and he said, "In order for me to earn a minimum wage, an annual minimum wage of $30,000 a year, I need to gain at the average royalty rate of half a cent per listen." Of course, that's not the only way artists are making money. Ideally, in a perfect world, they're touring, they're selling merch, they're licensing some of their music. But right now, they aren't really on the table. So even when we think of live music itself, let's think of what was happening at the beginning of the pandemic. Celebrities were performing live from their bedrooms because they could. And artists who had maybe just quit their job in order to be a full-time musician, maybe they were working at Along and McQuaid and they said, you know what, now I'm going to make it. I'm deciding to put all my eggs in this basket and I'm going to go and I'm going to be an artist. And then the pandemic hits. How can they compete with someone who is a AAA artist performing music in their bedroom? It doesn't pay the bills if you're giving away your content for free. So those AAA artists continued to donate their time, do collaborations via Zoom, and release new music because they had the funds to do so. But the middle tier artists who had tours booked and were staring at a blank calendar and couldn't pay their bills by going live on Instagram, they couldn't do that. They couldn't compete. They had to create engaging content and then attempt to get people to pay for it. So for many, the idea of paying an artist who you've not heard of versus just turning on your favorite Netflix show. It's like, it's a challenge, right? So even in order to be competitive and create content for digital dissemination, live streaming has a multitude of barriers to entry. It requires a fast internet connection, a quiet room, access to equipment. And in tech these days, there's actually a real challenge right now when it comes to technicians employed in the live music sector. There are little to no work opportunities in live right now, and many workers are actually falling through a gap in support coming from the federal government because they're not employed. They can't access Canada's emergency wage subsidy program because they don't have normal work. They just get gigs one at a time. So people are leaving the industry, and some are owners of major gear used for live performances and festivals. And if these capital assets are sold, how will we host more than one major event at a time within the province moving forward? We need to protect our infrastructure by collaborating across cultural sectors and borders to find out what's working and ensure we'll be ready to provide Canadians with live opportunities when it's safe to do so. And, you know, luckily we have an organization like the Canadian Live Music Association who are doing incredible advocacy work on behalf of the industry. And as the date for the federal budget approaches, their voice is more important than ever. Some other interesting things that have come up are folks who are working excuse me, in the film and television sector that is booming right now. And I've understood that they're looking for anyone who can hold a hammer to come and get a job. So you wonder whether there might be an opportunity there for some of our live workers to maybe collaborate across that cultural sector. So new innovations coming every day. One in particular from our province. Laura Simpson co-founded Side Door with singer-songwriter Dan Mangan. Although the company was originally for in-person shows only, they quickly expanded to the online sphere once gatherings became unsafe. Their job is to help artists, curators, festivals, and venues keep creating shows and helping audiences find them through high-quality digital concert production. Looking forward to the borders reopen again, how will those venues who are still in business manage the onslaught of artists wanting to tour? Because for those who are still able to be working as artists, of course you would want to tour at your first available opportunity. Even as things open up, it's not going to be easy. There are only so many spaces that will be able to put on live shows. And when all artists are aiming to get booked, there will be challenges for those who are emerging to get a fair shot at those spots when there are so many high-level artists also keen to get back to live music performance. Music Nova Scotia has been well known over the last decade for our export program. Artists through support and programming by the Organization of Travel to Festivals in the UK, US, Netherlands, Estonia, Germany, and more. But since the borders are closed, we have a responsibility and an overdue opportunity to really focus on our emerging talent. This past February, Music Nova Scotia was able to repurpose funds from canceled Nova Scotia Music Week to create the Sessions program, an opportunity for 15 emerging and mid-career artists to record live performance videos at 5 historic music venues across the province. It was an incredible experience to be able to hear live music again. For me, it was the first time since the pandemic started. The artists got up on stage, they took off their masks, and when they started playing, it sounds cliche, but honestly, it was really magical. There was a sense in a way of a deep responsibility. Like I thought about in that moment, how many people around the country right now are listening to live music? And that's not something you ever think about because you're lucky enough to have music on the same block as you in most cases when you're hearing live music. It's something I won't forget for sure. And I'm sure most of you hopefully have had that opportunity yourselves over the course of the last year. It was amazing to see the joy also on the artists' faces, being able to perform again. Some of them had had that opportunity before and some hadn't. When we got together for dinner that evening, which was another foreign concept, to be at dinner with people you didn't know, we swapped stories, commiserated, and we actually shared a lot of hope for what's to come. So moving forward, we at Music Nova Scotia are giving artists a high quality live performance video to use in online showcasing, pitching to festival bookers, applying for grants, and more. And then we worked with artists to create an electronic press kit for pitching digitally to domestic and international delegates in 150 individual meetings that were taking place on Saturday. In addition to the COVID grant support, we also have a variety of investment programs that run yearly in conjunction with the province of Nova Scotia. One particular success story I'd like to share with you comes from Nova Scotian artist Bria Isabel, who at the beginning of the pandemic released the track Good News with Classified. With a COVID relief grant from Music Nova Scotia, Bria was able to buy gear to record high quality vocals from her home studio. Since then, she's actually had exciting and pretty unprecedented success. She was recently contracted to write and produce 5 songs for a feature-length film written and directed by Shelley Thompson of Trailer Park Boys fame. She also landed a featured track on the season 2 premiere of CW's Batwoman for $15,000 US. And that's a song that was written on Zoom with co-writers in New York and Nashville and produced and mixed by Bria here in our province. Even in the wake of the pandemic, we are starting to see some successes as artists can build their spaces here in the province. And this has been a long time thing, from what I understand in this province, is creating and engaging talent to stay in the province and having younger people keep their careers within music in Nova Scotia. In the past, lots of people have felt like in order to be successful, they have to move to a Toronto or an LA. But now there are many artists who are not only moving back home, but also seeing opportunities this province can offer and choosing to move here to create. We need to be doing more to support this, like potentially introducing a production tax credit for capital purchases. So when we look to Music Nova Scotia support for artists, we're kicking things off with the East Coast Music Awards taking place in Sydney in early May. Nova Scotian artists and creatives actually account for 117 of the 216 nominations, which is pretty impressive. Shortly thereafter, the Women's World Hockey Championships will be taking place in Truro and Halifax, and we have some exciting programming planned, including a special quarantine concert of incredible Nova Scotian talent for the 10 teams from around the world while they self-isolate. As I mentioned, this fall will be the return of Nova Scotia Music Week. We sincerely hope you will be able to join us for some of our programming in the first week of November. Music Nova Scotia will be working closely with the provincial health authorities to ensure that any in-person events are adhering to the public health guidelines and the safety of artists and attendees are of our utmost priority. All in-person programming will include a COVID safety plan, training for all staff and volunteers, and a backup plan for a digital event should new restrictions be imposed. So, what does this reopening look like? Many of us are wondering. I wonder. I think we all do. We have had opportunities, as I mentioned, to attend a live performance in the last year, many of us in Nova Scotia, and we are really lucky to have that. There are myriad small halls and festivals around the province who will be working with limited teams, budgets, and tickets, but are still doing everything they can to put on concerts in the upcoming months. These concerts will seem inconvenient, perhaps. You'll wear your mask, you'll be socially distanced, you'll potentially sit outside on a circle in the grass or at a table. Maybe you'll need to get a rapid test and show a negative result before you're admitted. As we've all seen with COVID, things can truly change at a moment's notice. But I invite you to take the time to think about what's going on behind the scenes at these shows. As I mentioned, COVID safety plan in place, workplace training for volunteers and staff, awareness for screening policies and protocols. For example, daily COVID questionnaires, large-scale events might need to have a wristband system. If you've done the check that day, you need a yellow wristband. The next day, it's a blue one. When you have a big venue, people are coming and going from many different entrances and exits. And so how are you ensuring that there's only one entrance and exit? What do the lineups look like? What do you do if someone doesn't pass a temperature check? What's the process for trying to find a replacement for that person when you're already dealing with a limited audience? Exciting measures are actually being seen around the world. For example, is similar in scope to Nova Scotia, with Tallinn, its capital, as a comparative population to Halifax, and GDP per capita is in line as well. Estonia has just confirmed a 42 million euro culture and recreation aid package, along with a 6 million euro risk fund for large events. Or take Ireland, where the arts minister, Catherine Martin, is advocating for a universal basic income for artists, which would help mitigate the threat to the live sector, minimizing loss of skills and contribute to its gradual regrowth. It would encourage entrepreneurship and enhanced creativity, as recipients wouldn't be forced to engage in alternative work to cover basic living costs. New funding from the federal government was recently announced to support the Live Music Back to Work Action Plan. This support is truly needed, but unfortunately it's limited to projects that are only new in scope. So people are having to create projects in order to access the funds. Support is needed for core operational funding in order to keep the industry thriving. We must continue to advocate for support from the federal government for the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy Program. Without it, many music businesses would not be able to survive. Are able to try to support these creatives in our province and around the world. In addition to safely attending live events, there are really easy things to do. Like you can go to an artist's website and see how they're looking for your support and what their call to action is. Perhaps they have a new album. They might be selling merch online, or maybe they took time off from music during the pandemic and started a podcast or wrote a book. I encourage you all to take the time in the coming months to learn about the amazing work the province has done, to continue to learn, and to encourage others to get out there and attend those events and support artists. Remember, at the end of the day, while I may sound sick, I think that we hope that audiences will safely and with health return to live events, because in order for us to support the success of tomorrow, we have to support artists today. So thank you very much. Mm-hmm. And if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
I'm interested in music referral.
Mm-hmm.
The audience you normally attract that, and what are your reasonable expectations?
Okay, so the question is what audience we normally attract for Music Week in Truro and what our expectations are. And I think, you know, when it comes to what our plans are, we can only really plan for what we have as the restrictions now. I think that that's the safest thing to do. A lot of people hope that with vaccines and with rapid test accessibility, there might be options to have potentially loosened restrictions as there are in other places in the world right now. But I think for us to be safe, we have to just plan for what we know right now. And if we're able to have the opportunity to open up new tickets, new seats, then that would be, I'm sure, welcome to everyone in the community. Mm-hmm. Okay, sure. If you're watching on Facebook, you can also ask questions there as well. Or Zoom. Yeah. And I will say, you know, I think it's important to mention all this because it is actually a really tough time. And I think it's hard when you take a look at the music industry because music brings us such joy. It can be hard to hear some of these facts, but I think that the joy is the thing that is the most important. And that's what has often brought artists into the industry in the first place. So joy really is still at the heart of this. And the more we get artists on stages, the more that those stages stay in business and people can continue to put money back into the music industry so that we can continue to have joy from that. So, you know, I think the one thing I would make sure you take away from today is not that, you know, music is going and everything is dire. We have an opportunity to rise up as audience members and lovers of music in order to be the ones to help the industry rebound, especially in our province this summer.
You spoke about artists
Mhm. Hmm. I mean, it's a great question. I think that the audiences, from what we've discussed, we were having some meetings in Truro today with our future host committee for Nova Scotia Music Week this fall. And I mean, it seems that whenever people talk about music and return to live, people are keen and they're excited and they're engaged. And you almost want to say maybe more than before. You worry that, if you're not engaging with your audience, that they may drift away and become interested in something else. And I think that the pandemic might have had the opposite effect for those who have taken a little bit of time off. And, maybe you were a patron of the arts for the National Ballet, for example, and you haven't been engaging digitally. That's because that's not where your comfort level lies. But the return to live might be the thing to bring you back. Yeah. Well, oh, okay. I'll answer this one. Just that it's a great point. I'll give an example. We just launched a new grant stream called the Artistic Creation Program. Oh, sure. I'll repeat the question. Absolutely. So the question was, what about support for emerging talent that doesn't potentially have an audience already? And a new grant program we just launched called the Artistic Creation Program, which is a program to support artists who identify as BIPOC, so Black, Indigenous, and people of color. And this is a specific grant for artists who have never received funding from Music Nova Scotia before. Because I think that there are lots of people who see what we can offer and see a music industry association and see success of artists that we have sent to, as I mentioned, Estonia and the US and the UK, and they get overwhelmed and they think, well, that's not for me. I don't. And the point is that we are more than that. And we would like to be more than that. And if there are barriers to entry of people not feeling like they see themselves in our programming and who we support, we'd like to change that. And this is hopefully a small step in that direction.
Hello, my name is Debbie Van Volpen. And I'm thinking catching the cough.
No, you're
No,
not. Don't
enough.
say that. Goodness.
Excuse me. I'm a member of the TUC Talks team as well. And I'm very pleased to be asked to thank Allegra this evening for your very, very informative talk this evening about the power of music and how it has been such a large part of our lives during the pandemic. And especially, I think, from the talk tonight about how we really have to help support our artists, especially in Nova Scotia. We hope that our gift of appreciation will seem fitting for you. We usually give an apron to our guests to symbolize that we hope our talks are food for thought.
Oh, love it.
And that's for our audiences, of course. But as music is food for the soul, I guess our passions of food, music, and thoughtful conversations are definitely in harmony with each other.
I love it. That's great.
Thank you, Allegra, for your thoughts and ideas about music in Nova Scotia and how we navigate the present for our artists as well as our populations. We have learned so much tonight and will definitely be orchestrating this information into how we think about and how music can move us forward in our lives. So thank you again. So here's our token. We hope you wear it well.
Oh my goodness. Thank you. Oh, wow. What do we have here? Oh my goodness. This is wonderful.
You may
Thank
have to model this. Usually I get told I have to model it, but maybe you'll model it for us tonight since we've
You'd
got
like
a little
me
bit
to
of time.
model it. All right. I do love cooking.
Good.
Thank you.
Very good.
This is
So-
wonderful.
TUC Talks, food for thought.
Wonderful. Thank you. This is where
Thank
we
you.
wish we could give hugs. Thank
I
you
know,
so
I
much.
know.
I
It's a
appreciate it.
virtual one,
Yeah.
even when we're beside each other.
Yeah.
Thank you again, Allegra. And thank you, everybody, for joining us these past few COVID months. This is our last TUC Talks for the season. And I want you to stay tuned, though, for the next few months, because we are going to be announcing our lineup for the fall. And they should be some very informational, inspirational, transformative conversations. So stay tuned, take care, and be safe. Thank you.